Welcome to the Q&R Tuesday. Today we are with Ed Yeoman, who is Ratterman's East Coast sales representative. Today we're talking about liquid cylinders. He's going to be answering our customers' top questions about liquid cylinders in 10 minutes or less. How are you today, Ed?
Oh, everything's great here from sunny New England.
I know, I heard you guys have had quite the weather.
Yeah, 3 or 4 seasons a week here, it seems like.
Keeping you on your toes. Well, being that we only have 10 minutes or less, I will hop right into the questions.
Okay.
The first question we have is, the relief valve is going off constantly. What should I do?
Well, I mean, we could spend a half an hour just talking about relief valves, but I think what you'd need to do is if the customer's saying the relief valve's going off constantly, that's a quantitative type thing that everybody's whole concept of what constantly is. So you really need to kind of define, what's happening, how often is it going off. You need to decide what's the class of the cylinder, what's the DOT classification out of the 4 common classifications that are out there. What's the customer's application? Is the right cylinder for their application? What relief valve is on the cylinder? Because you could have a higher pressure cylinder with a lower pressure relief valve on it for like liquid applications, and maybe that's the one that's selected, but you really need a gas use application. So you'd need to ask a whole series of questions to really kind of get down to specifically what's going off, but that's really a common one. Another example would be a low pressure cylinder with a 22 PSI on it that was recently filled, and it was filled with liquid that's at a higher pressure, usually 80, maybe even 100 PSI liquid, and that cylinder would need to stabilize first. So the relief valve may be doing its job and relieving the pressure internally in the cylinder a little bit more frequently than you like, but it's really not all that uncommon.
That's great. And if they wanted to find out what those questions are they should be asking when troubleshooting, is that something they should just contact Ratterman for, and we can help them through it?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a 4-hour class that we teach, and it's actually can extend into a 2-day hands-on session. We teach customers really how to troubleshoot liquid cylinders and how to repair them all the way up to just shy of pulling a vacuum on it, so that they can really maximize or minimize actually the amount of cylinders that they need to send out to have repaired. So cylinders are there in their facility and not gone for weeks at a time being repaired. And it's also a lot more cost effective doing it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so second question is, I see Ratterman offers a square base or round base liquid cylinder. What are the pros and cons of those? Well,
I mean, it's can be a matter of, what your priorities and your preferences are. The square base is a 4-caster design that has a handle on it, and that actually is quite good for maneuvering the cylinder. These cylinders, a 240-liter cylinder, can weigh upwards of 1,000 pounds plus, depending on what gas is in it. So they can be quite heavy to maneuver around. So having that handle on there can give you a lever and give you a little bit better maneuverability. Plus, people think that it's a little bit more stable. The round base cylinders are good because you can get dual density on a pallet. If you're using like a Weldcoa style pallet, which is a common pallet design, you can get 2 cylinders on a pallet base, as opposed to a square base that's a little bit wider footprint. You can only get 1, so you get extra density on the truck and get more cylinders per given truck delivery. So plus the round base, if you have a polisher unit, the round base is a little bit easier to get polished on a polishing machine. You don't have to remove the handle and have that square base flailing around. You just can have a round base cylinder. It's a little bit easier to get polished up. So there's some of the pros and cons.
Great. Okay. And those are able to be moved around in, like, let's say like a lab where people that aren't normally working with gas equipment.
They're all movable. I mean, a piano is movable. It's not necessarily portable. They are heavy.
Yes. Yes, but they have the wheels and
Yep, both have a wheel design. The round base has a 5-caster design, and the square base has a 4-caster design. Two pivotal, 2 fixed. The round base, all 5 swivel. So I mean, they're all maneuverable. they all roll fairly easily, but it's just the square base has that handle on it to give you kind of like a fulcrum and a little bit easier movability. I personally like the square bases in lab situations, and I like the round bases for the dual density. So I mean, I like both of them, and we offer both. And some customers have a combination of both for their given customer and their application.
That's great. Okay, and then number 3, how can I tell if a cylinder has lost its vacuum?
Well, I mean, there's really 3 methods to determine whether a cylinder has a bad vacuum. Obviously, you need a strong vacuum between the inner vessel where the cryogenic liquid's stored and the outer vessel, the outside ambient temperature. And that strong vacuum really holds that insulating value. Without that vacuum, that cold cryogenic liquid that's 350 to 400 degrees below zero is just boiling off constantly, and it's going to build pressure because as that liquid flashes into gas, there's a 700 to 800 to 1 ratio between volume of liquid and volume of gas. It's going to build pressure internal to the cylinder. So there's 3 methods, as I said. One is to weigh it every 24 hours over a 48-hour period of time, and you can tell from that a calculation on the amount of volume that was lost over those 2 24-hour intervals, and determine if it's greater than 2%, it's probably a soft vacuum or a bad vacuum. If you have Raderman sells an NER tester, which is a flow meter that you can install in the cylinder, and within a few hours you can determine whether the cylinder has a bad vacuum or not. And the other option is that you'd need to have a vacuum pump and a digital meter and a lot of additional hardware expense, and then you'd be able to determine whether it has a bad vacuum in 10 or 15 minutes. But I'd recommend, if you want to know if the cylinder is bad, give us a call and we'd be able to walk you through some scenarios and sell you some fairly economical equipment that you can use to determine whether it's a bad vacuum or not.
Perfect. And then our last question here is, I have concerns that contaminants will be drawn back through the gas output. Is there anything I can use to protect this backflow possibility? Well,
that's funny that you should ask that, because right now during this whole COVID issue, customers are concerned that there'd be any contamination that would get back into the cylinder. Another new emerging industry that people want to protect against is the cannabis industry, right? So because it has odors that are associated with it. So anything that get drawn back into the cylinder could have a negative connotation. So funny you should ask. I happen to have one here. Generate manufactures a combination unit that will meet all the criteria of the SB26 requirement for tamper-proof and tamper evidence, and also has the fitting built into this unit, but they can incorporate a check valve, so it will all be in the same unit that you can install on your cylinder. So
that's perfect. Yeah, actually, not to plug this, but our podcast episode coming out this Thursday is about cannabis extraction, and they talk about how that is a big issue that they deal with, is trying to make sure that the terpenes, I believe they call them, don't backflow into the cylinder, so that when they send it out for CO2 use somewhere else, like for beverage, it doesn't taste or smell like cannabis.
Right.
So.
And I know that, and then if it does, then they have cylinders that are dedicated to that application, and it just creates confusion to make sure you get the right cylinders to the right individuals. Right. I know also out in your area, another common thing is the use of argon in the wine industry, and that they will put the check valves on liquid cylinders to prevent any kind of contamination getting back into the cylinder as well.
Oh, I did not know that. That's great to know. Well, Ed, you answered all 4 questions. I believe we're under 10 minutes, so thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, actually. So, we're here to help, so please just pick up the phone, email, give us a call. We'd be glad to help you out in any way we can.